Welcome to the Forum Watch, DKVine's own topic review, hosted by Scholarly Sat and some other member who I can't remember. Listen to the Forum Watch or else I'll kill you. I'll slaughter or shoot ya, whatever will suit ya. Maybe I'll frame ya, or maybe I'll maim ya.
Hey, welcome to Forum Watch, Season 2. I'm Saf, and I'm here with my guest this episode, Mr. Bahmo Spartacus.
Hello, Saf.
Hey, how's it going, dude?
Decent. I mean,
Only decent?
Mildly got a mild frog in my throat, but it shouldn't be too bad.
Better than a spicy frog in your throat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Off to a great start this season. As you may have noticed, it's been about a month since we last recorded an episode, and we've had a bit of a cast change-up. My former veteran co-host, Scrap69, has taken a bit of a hiatus from the project, taken a bit of a hiatus from the forum. Sad to see him go.
Yeah, I didn't even know he was gone, except that I guess I did see posts on the Forum Watch thread. So what happened there? You said he had his girlfriend who was sick of being stood up.
Well, he'd just been spending a lot of time on this project, a lot of time posting on the forums. He didn't have as much time to spend with his girlfriend. He said he didn't have as much time to spend even playing video games, And I kind of feel like that discussing video games and discussing video game discussion shouldn't get in the way of playing the actual video game,
Well, I guess it depends on which video game you're talking about.
That is true.
I'd much rather discuss Sonic 2006 than play it.
Me personally, I'd rather discuss any of the Sonic games than play them.
Gee.
Yeah, I'm quite the hater. No, I actually never played the original trilogy back in the day. I didn't really get into it until just this past year.
Well, if you got into it, when you say you're quite the hater, what do you mean?
I mean, they're not, I guess I'm just a bit of a snob, because to me, Sonic might be the fourth best platformer series that I've played. So, I'm always going to be comparing it to Donkey Kong, to Mario, to those few Rayman games I've played.
It's interesting you mention that, because Mario's the one that came first, unless you're talking about Donkey Kong, the arcade game. Sega made Sonic as a way to be cooler than Mario. I'm implying quotes there. And
quote unquote.
Yeah, Donkey Kong Country, as I understand, was Nintendo's response to Sonic. They had Rare build a fast-paced platformer of their own with graphical appeal and a sense of style. So, yeah, that argument makes sense.
Oh, yeah. And I guess it's a little unfortunate because those early Sonic games came out on, 1990 through like 1993 on the Genesis, which, about as powerful as the Super Nintendo, but not quite.
It really wasn't.
Yeah.
It had one. If you watch the Angry Video Game Nerds comparison, the Genesis had a total of one advantage over the Super Nintendo. Everywhere else it was lagging behind. And of course the Genesis was an earlier system. It was made mostly to beat the NES, which is why it has 3 buttons. Oh wow, it has 3 buttons. The NES only has 2.
Do the math.
Yeah, and if you remember the commercials where they brag about blast processing all the time.
Oh, yeah.
What they were basically referring to was their processor was faster than Super Nintendo's. And it was quite a bit faster, but that's the only way they were technically superior to Super Nintendo.
Yeah, and I saw in that Angry Nerd video that, he said that there was only really a few games that you could really notice it on.
Yeah, probably the games they played up in their advertising, but...
Yeah. cherry picking them.
Yeah, as I said in that thread about Howard Lincoln, Sega was kind of a douchey company that had it coming.
They really were. I mean, they're pretty much their entire marketing campaign was about how much better they were than the Super Nintendo.
Yeah. It's probably a good thing they lost.
Yeah, it's a good thing they lost. It's a good thing they started developing for Nintendo, because now I can play Sonic games on my GameCube.
It's interesting because that was something I was going to talk about. But why don't we go to the scripted interview questions, and I'll discuss it a bit more.
Gotcha. Well, Mr. DK Spartacus, that wasn't your original name on the forums, now was it?
No, it was not. My original name was Bahmo, and that was also my original screen name anywhere.
Bahmo. Now, why Bahmo?
Oh, okay, you ready for a really goofy story?
I'm always ready for a goofy story.
Okay, I was at my neighbor's house. We were drawing pictures one time, and I had a bit of artist block. I didn't know what to draw, so I figured, what the hell, I'm just gonna doodle some random thing and try to add as much to the picture as I can. So I ended up drawing this really weird alien-looking creature on a skateboard with a witch hat and a mustache and a cigar, skateboarding through what I'm assuming was supposed to be the Grand Canyon. And then I wanted to top it off by having him saying something. So I put a cartoon speech bubble up, but I didn't know what to make him say. So I just wrote some brain fart sentence, Bahmo mohi Eva farg pakistoi rashos. And this time my neighbor saw the drawing and he said, Thomas, that's the ugly... Or I guess he called me Tommy. That was how I went away. Tommy, that is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. And he actually took it away from me, which made me really pissed. And then he told my brother about it, and they were both making fun of me for it. And they kept trying to keep this picture away from me, because I thought it was funny. They didn't. So, eventually they took it away from me for the last time, and they just lost the thing.
Oh.
And I never got over it. We never found it again, so to annoy them, I named myself Bahmo on every game profile I made. So once I went over to internet forums, that was already my screen name. And I never even thought of the guy being named Bahmo. That just happened to be the first word I wrote. And no, I didn't know at the time that there was a city in Myanmar named Bahmo.
Oh, that was my follow-up question about the city in Myanmar. You know, it's interesting that your name is Thomas, but your original Bahmo account eventually got its name changed to Seth.
That's correct, it did.
What's the story behind that?
If I remember correctly, I think it would have been that thread I made, practical jokes you've known and played. And you also said you wanted to know about my custom title, Way Too Much Information. Well, it was originally just too much information, and I don't know why. I don't know what it was particularly that got me that. I know what it was generally, of course. But when I made this practical jokes you've known or played thread, I put one of them down as this joke I played on a guy whose camera I found. I was really, really anti-tobacco at the time because of my father's stance on it, so I noticed this guy had a Marlboro-themed camera case. I figured I wanted to play a prank on him because of that. So what I did, seriously, is I opened the case, got the camera out, stuck it down my pants, and took a picture of my cock, or several. And Jim... he might have been going by the Joker then. I think he was Jim then, though.
I believe he was Jim at that point.
He said, God damn it, Bahmo, you smokers don't deserve a shot of your crusty cock. And I said, hey, fuck, man. And by the way, it's not really that crusty. and Carly gets on and says, TMI! TMI! And so that's when somebody changed my name, I think, to my custom title to Way Too Much Information. And he also renamed me Seth. I'm pretty sure it was Mark who renamed me Seth after the super bad guy who had the big scene where he drew a bunch of dicks.
I had that whole notebook full of them.
Yeah.
Now, was this a digital camera, or was it like an old-fashioned one?
It was an old-fashioned one with film, so I'm pretty sure it took that guy until he developed it to realize that somebody had gone and taken pictures of his dick.
It'd be great if he actually took it into like a photo place and got it developed.
Yeah, I wonder if they the cameraman asked him, "Were you taking pictures of your penis?" and he was saying, "What? What do you take me for?" And they say, "Well, we got pictures of penises in here." I wonder if somewhere that guy is listening to that podcast thinking, "Holy shit, I finally found the guy who took a picture of his dick over 10 years ago." It must have been closer to 20 years ago now. So
well,
now
I'm sorry,
the
go on.
story behind both of my old usernames.
Yes, a long and storied history of nomenclature. It says in my documentation here that you joined on the 7th of December, 2005. Now, had you been lurking the forums before that?
I'm pretty sure I wasn't, and this is what I was going to get into with Sonic. I'll give you a basic idea of what led me to join the forums. So, back in the early 2000s, that was the time that Sega had exited the console race, and since they were starting to release all their Sonic games on the GameCube, I got back into Sonic at the time, and I was really bothered that the media seemed to be gang-raping the Sonic Adventure series, not just because I disagreed with a lot of their critiques and didn't think their statements of it being untrue to its roots were valid, but also because back when those games were released on the Dreamcast, they'd been lauded. The critics loved them back when they were on the Dreamcast. So it made me think something was pretty wrong once they criticized it just once Sega started falling hard times. And so my first
it's the same kind of thing you saw with
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
My first forum ever was the Sonic board, where I was happy to find people who agreed with me that the media was being unfair. So I was there for a while. Meanwhile, yeah, the same thing was happening with Rare. Nintendo had sold them, and they weren't really regaining a good reputation with Microsoft. I think at the time I joined, the only game that had been released for Xbox was grabbed by the Ghoulies, which didn't get good reviews. So that's about the same time that a lot of media like EGM were starting to turn on Rare and put their games like Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64 and Jet Force Gemini into lists of the most overrated games of all time.
Yeah, that bullshit.
And again, it's not just that I disagreed with them, it's that they were going against what they'd said, talking up games once the creators were on top of the world, but then when the creators fell on hard time, and I don't know, maybe were unable to bribe them anymore, they started turning on them. So, if I remember correctly, the guy I learned of Donkey Kong Universe either through Bahmosode or Sean. They were the ones who were bitching about Donkey Kong's downfall on DeviantArt. Bahmosode wrote a essay about why he hated Jungle Beat. And so, via one of those guys I found at DKU when it was the same kind of thing. I liked being among people who had more or less the same conclusion that I did about the gaming media being bullshit and mean and unfair. So that's basically how I got my start on forums and on the internet productive community as a whole, is because I wanted to fight back against what I felt was media bias. And Donkey Kong Universe was a good place to do it.
It's interesting because, you see a lot of people, there's always that discussion like me and Scraps would have when we'd see somebody join like in 2005, 2006 in the middle of the buyout, and we'd always kind of speculate with one another, why they joined when all this bad shit was happening to the franchise, and there wasn't a lot of good publicity out there, not a lot of good games out there, and it's interesting that you join more or less because of what was going on with all that.
Well, I don't know if you watched Todd in the Shadows, but what he said is that you're not allowed to say you like things on the internet. So, I think in many regards, people like going on to the internet to express negative opinions, and that makes it sound worse than it is. I think the thing about the internet is that it truly is the last haven for free speech. The old joke is, if we have free speech, why do we have phone bills? And that alludes to a very true factor, is that even if you have the right to say what you want, the fact that money's involved means that there's always going to be an official position that raises its voice louder. And so the internet's the best place to counter that. So I think that's why a lot of dissenting opinions end up on the internet.
Yeah, it's it causes a lot of unfortunate things in a lot of ways, but it's so great that there is that outlet for free speech, and it's great that we were able to come up in a time with that outlet.
Yeah. Let's hope that Tom Wheeler fuck gets fired.
Oh man, I can't even believe. I can't even believe that they're even messing with net neutrality. Like,
and
really?
They have the gall to call it a net neutrality bill.
Oh yeah, it's like in 1984 you had the Ministry of Love and the Ministry of Truth, who did the exact opposite of the things that they were named after. It's Man, it's like life has become such a farce. It's almost hard to believe.
Yeah, the good thing is that at least people hate him.
Yeah, it's great because you can, it's great though because all these people on the internet at least have this sense of the internet being really important to them and being important to them for these reasons, and that's why I just can't believe that they would even go after that, because people are going to get upset and start, making their voice heard. If you didn't mess with the internet, you could probably get most of these people to just keep on going on.
Yeah, the thing that I think that a lot of the people in the United States still care about is their ongoing concept of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think a lot of people in this country, maybe in other countries, I don't know, but a lot of Americans seem to feel that if it doesn't affect my happiness, it's not really relevant. So, in other words, I wish people here cared more about what goes on in China to make their toys, or what goes on in the Latin American countries to make their burgers and fruit. I wish they cared about it more, but they don't, because they only think of the toys as cool and the food as good. But once you start messing with the people on this steep a level where it affects them directly, they do tend to get pissed off.
And hopefully once they're pissed off, they'll start opening their minds more to these other issues.
Well, that's already happened, I think. We have I think, more counterculture in this decade than we've had in any before. This decade and the last. I sometimes forget it's a new decade. But
yeah,
but
4 years on.
We have more anti-establishment views coming on the internet. Not just on the internet, but on TV and the radio, too. We're in a big anti-establishment era that I don't see winding down anytime soon.
Oh, no, I only see it getting, just ramping up and up. Can't wait for the next decade.
Yeah.
And, I think, in a way, it's even great when you have, these super conservative, talk radio people who, even if I, strenuously disagree with a lot of what they have to say, at least they are, presenting that anti-establishment voice. And they are reaching people who might not be reached by, sarcastic posts on an internet forum.
Well, I don't know if I'd say the super conservative people are anti-establishment. I guess it depends how they define things. I mean, maybe you're talking about the conspiracy theorists, and I think those people have basically ridden in on the coattails of anti-establishment views as a whole. There's some people who call themselves conservative that believe in rallying around the flag, and there's some people who believe the U.S. is Satan's tool for implementing the New World Order. I think that's bullshit, but the fact is that our government does need to take a step back in some regards.
Oh, yes, quite so. I've always noticed that you enjoy starting political threads on the DKVine forums. You enjoy having those political discussions. What is it about DKVine specifically that draws you to have those discussions?
It's probably because DKVine, unlike many video game related forums, isn't anti-politics as a whole. I think I feel free to mention such things in the same way that a lot of people do. And I am less in favor of voicing my opinions in knowledge that people are going to hate it than I used to be. For example, before I was revealing myself as Bahmo again, somebody brought up in that soap opera thread my bitch fest about Christmas and what it had become in the Western definition. Back then, that was how I thought. These days, though I still have that opinion, I don't like to repeatedly subject people to my opinion as much. I have no problem expressing it, but I don't keep harping on it. Unless people want to hear it. If they don't, though, I'm willing to stop. But I mean that's individual opinions. Like, I won't spend too long trying to convince people of any given thing, but if I have a new thought, I'm gonna say it. For example, I won't talk about how much I'm pissed off by the Western view of Christmas, but I might go on and talk about how I'm pissed off by China.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a lot of political posters throughout, my experiences on forums who just, they become kind of a cliche. They just kind of harp on the same things recurringly, and it kind of becomes like, yeah, okay, dude, we've heard it, but that's never a sense I've gotten from you, and I don't think it's a sense most people have gotten from you.
Well, I think a big difference between I won't say me and average political posters because that's too egotistical. I'd say Donkey Kong Vine posters and other forums posters is that in Donkey Kong Vine we sort of look at each other as people as opposed to just random guys who come on to say things. So we're allowed to have personalities and political views besides the same either or right or left stuff you hear a lot of other places. And, yeah, that too is bullshit, the right or left thing. That's the legacy of the Nationalists, something that happened to be an arrangement in the National Assembly meeting that led up to the French Revolution. It has no relevance anywhere else, and I don't want to hear anybody on the internet spout some mindless right versus left stuff. I can get that off the internet.
Yeah, you can turn on the TV, you can go to CNN.com.
And that, unfortunately, is a product of a winner-take-all system. But, I mean, I like the Donkey Kong Vine's ability to facilitate better things. For example, it was really refreshing to hear somebody like Jim talking about how he turned against what liberalism had become in his country, and to a large extent in mine, too, because it lives on the judge not lest you be judged principle, in assumption that if it gives its opponents an inch, they'll give it an inch too, and that's not how illiberal doctrines work. So, I consider myself a liberal socialist, but I don't look at it in the same terms that other self-proclaimed liberal socialists do. I really do think that if Western liberal traditions are to survive, they have to become less tolerant of their opponents, the way their opponents are of them. And that's I think Jim's the first guy online I've heard who has a similar opinion to me in that regard.
Yeah, it was always difficult for me, coming up as an older teenager and starting to realize that the people around me who agreed with my opinions nominally, when I really got to know them and I really got to listen to, why they thought the way they did, that they didn't really have as rigorous an understanding and were just playing off, the culture around them. And it's really unfortunate, and it really makes it hard, to go out there and identify as a liberal or something like that when, people hear that and they're going to compare that to all these people who, aren't as nuanced or as understanding as we are.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned on I think it was the thread about the Rwandan genocide, I actually went to college and studied politics and then history, and what I found is that even between colleges, the views of what history is are vastly different. But that, and I guess I'm meandering a little, but the point is, if you look into history in any detail, the whole belief that left-wing equals liberal, right-wing equals illiberal just doesn't stand up. For example, Mao Zedong wrote an essay called Combat Liberalism, which is something most people don't expect from the left based on their views of it here. And also, a lot of leftists in the United States think since Fidel Castro considers himself to be a leftist, he also must support everything they support. In fact, Fidel Castro is an extremely homophobic leader. So, there really is not the either-or sense of what politics are in the global sense that there is in America. And I had quite a bad politics teacher in community college who didn't get that. He was obsessed with the right and left scale, and he explained away the world's apparent debunking of it. I shouldn't say apparent, it's definitely a debunking of it by saying that you need to look at what a country's traditions are in order to explain what is right-wing according to that country and what is left-wing. No, because a country's traditions aren't really eternal either. So, I tend to subscribe more to the website politicalcompass.org's view, but even that's imperfect. I think it's better just to think about issues.
Definitely. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about the DKVine staff and whether they might be too liberal or improperly liberal. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that varies, because I haven't gone and looked at it. I mean, I'd have to look up the staff, and I haven't asked them all, what do you think about this issue? I do know that one of them said to, I think, Chaos Heart, why do you keep talking about overthrowing the government violently? Why not just wait till November to overthrow the government legally? That is, I think, a pretty... Sorry, I know I'm maybe on thin ice because I've been banned once. That's a pretty dumb statement. It's not overthrowing a government to elect someone else to it.
No, that's continuation of government.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying I advocate overthrowing the government. I'm long past that angsty teenage phase of my life. I think the government, though flawed, is a gift horse that we can't look too much in the mouth, because the people that would stand to take power in its absence, both from within the United States and without, a lot of them would be worse, in my opinion. So, no, I don't advocate getting rid of the U.S. government. I think it is, in fact, better than the sort of regime the survivalists who protest the government would implement if they had a chance. I hear those guys talking about how the government is infringing on their rights to brainwash their children with religion and spank their children. I just think of the Confederacy again.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I mean, it's the same. The government's tyrannical because they won't let me be a tyrant card.
The government won't let me go into another state and pull back these freed slaves.
Yeah. So, yeah, I have my problems with the way my government is, but I do think it has its strengths, too. I think our elections are bad by democracy standards. Our constitution and court systems, though, I think are pretty good as first world nations go.
Yeah, our constitution's pretty good for a document written in the 18th century.
Yeah. And what made me see it again is Jim, because as far as I know, Britain doesn't have a written constitution beyond the Magna Carta, which is quite a few more centuries old. So, when you have what they do, which is common law, you can let them decide we aren't going to bitch at Muslims while they can say whatever they want about the Jews. So, in Europe, it really is easier to change what a country's laws are based on what the prevailing culture is, and I think that's a problem. I used to want to move to Europe, not now. I do think their elections are better for changing their country genuinely, but I guess it runs both ways. You can change it for the worse.
Now, do you believe a parliamentary system is better than our first past the post kind of thing?
In large part, yes, because the parliamentary system allows more minorities to come into politics and have their views heard. Now, a lot of people will protest that in the parliamentary system you cannot vote by the individual candidate. You just have to elect what party gets in. But the flip side is that it's much easier to start one's own political party and get into politics in a parliamentary system, because let's say in America, the Democrats win 60% of the vote, the Republicans win 30% of the vote, the Greens win 20% of the vote, and the Libertarians win 10. Well, then the Democratic senators in. In Europe, it would be 60% of senators are Democrats, 30% of the senators are Republicans, 20% of the senators are Greens, and 10% are Libertarians. And they aren't even limited to 4 parties either. So it is easier for Europe to get minority views into politics, and there's not a stigma among voters about voting for the lesser evil. I think in Europe it is easier to vote for, in a parliamentary system in general, it's easier to vote your real interests without knowing you're going to sabotage it for the candidate that is most like you in favor of the candidate that is not at all like you. So yeah, the parliamentary system I do think is superior for getting people into politics. Now, do I think it's superior to not have a separate legislative and executive branch and to have common law, whereas by the parliament can rework the laws every time they change? No, I don't think that's superior. I think that's inferior to what we have here.
Gotcha. You've mentioned Jim several times. It sounds like you have quite a bit of respect for her.
I respect Jim in that he seems to be one of the very few people who doesn't consider himself far right-wing, yet believes that liberalism has become a defeatist doctrine that cares more about embodying liberal principles than achieving liberal results. So, my big problem with liberalism is that ever since Vietnam, they've gone from believing in fighting evil to believing fighting is evil. And this is true whether it's Ho Chi Minh abroad or Rush Limbaugh at home. I think liberals are just too nice to their opponents, and they expect niceness in return, which they don't get. Their opponents will just take more and more license against them. So I think liberalism needs to go back to pre-Vietnam form, more like FDR than John Lennon. Because, we had a liberal that got us through World War II and stood up to the tyrants of other countries, and we need that again. I think America needs the sort of liberal who will really combat the illiberal nations. And I think it's no accident that somebody like George W. Bush was as popular when he was playing the liberal in the international stage and talking about getting rid of foreign tyrants. I think the U.S. is a fundamentally liberal nation to the point that conservatives need to play that card to some extent. Reagan did it back in the 80s, talking about how, thanks to the way the liberal culture had gone, we let the communists win in Vietnam, and then they massacred people in Cambodia. And then Bush played the same card when he was talking about how we are the faction that wants to get rid of the Taliban. And I don't think that's strictly true. I think there wouldn't have been a Democrat in power who would have been able to stay in power if he said, no, we don't want to get rid of the Taliban. Nowadays, it's a little bit less clear. I think nowadays the left is turning against the war in Afghanistan. I have not. I think we need to thoroughly defeat the Taliban. And I also take issue with the people who say the idea that the communists won in Vietnam because they were better at censoring their atrocities, which vastly outnumbers ours, is just a right-wing talking point. For sure, it is a right-wing talking point, but it's also the official view of history that's endorsed by the Communist Party of Vietnam and believed by the overseas Vietnamese community that fled them. The fact is that Ho Chi Minh was banking on America's public opinion turning against the Vietnam War, something that the Vietnamese would not be allowed to do. And that's not a conspiracy theory, that's actually what he said. And he was right. I mean, I'm simplifying it. There were other reasons America lost Vietnam, such as that they were looking at it in terms of, we'll win because we have a higher body count, but they weren't willing to invade North Vietnam. I mean, that's a recipe for failure. And to be fair to both sides, a lot of conservatives act like it's strictly the liberals' fault for wanting to pull out of Vietnam. What they're ignoring is that the guy who got us into Vietnam was a Democrat, and the guy who got us out of Vietnam was Richard Nixon. And I think with Nixon, my guess is his planned overtures to China were already on the table, and he figured that if we invaded North Vietnam, the outcome would have been the same as when we invaded North Korea, which was that the Chinese would get involved and declare war on us, and that would be the end of his plans to establish trade and military alliance with China. So even though I subscribe in some degree to the belief that America's liberal culture is what lost them Vietnam, the right, its hands are not clean in that regard. I think the right also had an agenda that wasn't conducive to winning that conflict.
I see. Wow. Oh, thank you for going so in depth with it. It was very interesting.
Yeah, we've gone in quite a.
Of course.
We've gone quite into detail about stuff that has nothing to do with Donkey Kong.
Well, isn't that the way of the Forum Watch? Although, I guess you said you hadn't actually listened to the show.
No, I hadn't actually. And it's odd because I really like podcasts and listening to interviews with various people. I just didn't realize at the time that Forum Watch was a podcast.
Yeah, we didn't give it a very descriptive or very good name, did we?
No, I thought it was just like Ben's thread. I can't believe they posted this crap.
Yeah, we pretty much literally went with the first name we could come up with, and by episode 2, Sarcasm had written us a theme song, and well, at that point we couldn't change the name.
I see.
Yeah,
much like Donkey Kong Universe, a term which persists despite it being more about a damned fish than Donkey Kong.
The Royston travails. Man. But, I suppose returning back to the subject of the forum, you were eventually banned under your original account, around January 31st, 2008.
Sounds about right.
Do you remember the specific incident?
Yes, I do. Now, I always suspected that they were just getting sick of me and wanted to ban me before I got any more dick jokes in, although as far as I know, I'd promised them, no, I wouldn't do any more of that, but they were looking for an excuse to ban me. And Mark basically confirmed that in a thread where somebody asked what happened to me, that was the reason he banned me. But the specific incident where they took a license to ban me was in fact one where I made a thread about Lou Pearlman. If you don't know who that is, well, I didn't either until then. I just saw a news blurb. Lou Pearlman was the producer who unleashed a lot of boy bands like the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. And back then, or not really back then because that fad had already passed, but back in the 90s, the running joke about those bands is that they were gay. Or one of the members was gay or whatever.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Can you hold on just a second?
Sure.
Oh, sorry, I had a knock at the door. Continue. You're talking about boy bands being gay in the 90s.
Yeah, so, when I saw the news article of that guy decided to post, I actually gave my thread the title of, N sucks / Backstreet Backside Bangers creator band. And when I posted a picture and a link saying, and I typed, "Man, that guy looks obscenely gay. I guess he'll have some good times with Bubba in jail." And then when I posted it, I realized that it didn't load the picture, so I edited and said, "Wow, I guess the picture didn't load. Maybe the forum has a filter for getting rid of fat, ugly gay men." And that sent the guys over the edge. They didn't like what they perceived as extremely homophobic remarks, and so they banned me for that.
But they didn't keep you away forever now, did they?
They did not.
You rejoined.
You know what? The thing is, when they said, back then they had a message, if you think you were unbanned, if you think we're banned unjustly or want to ask about when you're banned, your details, call Clobber. I don't know what happened to that guy, but that was what the message said. So I messaged Clobber on the forums. He never got back to me. So I went to DeviantArt and messaged him, and I said, "Clobber, do you have a moment?" And he said, "Yeah, I have a moment." And so my next response was, "I want to talk about my ban," and he never responded to that. So after that, I rejoined as DK Spartacus. I made an account, and since I made a new Yahoo account it was, and since I wondered if my IP address was blocked, I waited until I went to my grandmother's house, logged in with that, and used that to get into the Donkey Kong universe. So that was when I joined as DK Spartacus, and I really don't know why I chose the name Spartacus. That is something I really don't remember.
Now, the DK part was because of a spam bot prevention scheme.
Exactly. The message they had was stick DK at the start of the name to prove you're not a spam bot, and then we'll remove it. So, in other words, if you want your name to be if you want your name to be something, put DK, and your name will be something. And if you want your name to be DK something, put DK something. But they never ended up removing DK Spartacus.
And even when they changed your name recently to
it still has DK Spartacus in parentheses. DK Spartacus.
Even though you've explained that, it's I always wondered about DK Rapper and whether he just wanted to be named Rapper.
I just think of him as the Crapper.
Oh man. So man, you've made about 3,500 posts in your DK Spartacus account.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, when you say it like that. Would you say DKVine is a big part of your life?
Probably not as much as it was back when I joined the first time, partially because gaming has changed a little. Donkey Kong's come back in Nintendo, whereas the Rare side of the universe, the site used to put its faith in, has died. So that's given a big change in that there's less to bitch about Donkey Kong-wise, whereas with the Rareware side, Banjo, Conquer, that stuff, everything that could be said has been said. So the vast majority of my posts are now in completely relevant discussion.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I felt with those recent layoffs and all the posts and discussion in that thread. It was like
it was in completely relevant discussion.
Interestingly enough, people are never really sure whether to put things that are kind of related in general DKU. I think people just don't put them in that forum because nobody really goes in that forum.
Yeah. Also because rare games with Connect Sports don't have that damn fish.
But they do have Mumbo, kinda.
They do.
Vaguely. The newest Connect Sports Rivals DLC with all the it has sponsorships from different companies within the Donkey Kong universe. And one of them is Mumbo's Bowling, and Mumbo actually sends you messages. So there's this huge debate over whether that counts as a Donkey Kong universe game, whether that's a physical appearance or not. The general, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin kind of thing that we're always arguing here.
That's another thing, is sad to admit, but I've kind of turned against the Donkey Kong universe's view of fandom. I think the continuity-based game fandom that they espouse is something that seemed like a good idea at the time, because back then, the company that was ignoring continuity, naturally Nintendo, was the one that seemed to be pissing on their legacy, was the one that was paying attention to continuity. Rareware was the one that seemed on paper to be the one respecting it, or at least they thought. But once we started getting something like Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, which respects continuity more than Donkey Kong Jungle Beat did, but is nonetheless, in my opinion, a big cock slap to the fandom, I started to turn against the continuity-based view of things. And I mean, that had been building for a while. I was getting sick of the fish and chaps mindset that I saw as basically an excuse to fawn over anything Rare did that they could. And then I, like many people, got over Conquer Live and Reloaded quickly and came to the opinion they bastardized the original. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was quite the last straw for me. So, and I mean, I'm amazed it took me that long to figure. And if you'll recall, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was just announced at the time I got banned, and it was still upcoming when I got back in. So, I made quite a bit of posts under both accounts complaining about the game. And I actually bought it, enjoyed it for a while, but eventually I came to the conclusion it isn't even good as a vehicle game.
Yeah, that's the thing, is, if it was like really solid and great as a vehicle game, you might be able to go, okay, this isn't right. This isn't what they should have done, but at least it's a good game. But yeah, it's pretty weak. I actually liked it quite a bit for the time I played it, but it just, eventually I just realized that the vehicle editor wasn't that sophisticated. There just wasn't a whole lot you could do with it to really sustain your interest.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think the two factors are unrelated at all. I think a big part of why it was a bad vehicle game is because it was trying to be a Banjo game in part. For example, in order to make it work with Banjo, they had to use magic, which is really technology, to control their technology in canon. So, you had a magic wand that could summon vehicles and could put them back together, and you had arbitrary rules made by a god who said you could only have the shopping cart in Showdown Town. And that's not at all what a vehicle game should be, in my opinion. In my opinion, there should be no magic wand. You shouldn't just be able to summon a vehicle wherever you like. However, on the flip side, you should be able to have a vehicle everywhere you want, provided you can actually drive it there. So in other words, no portals, no magic wands or anything like that, just what you can build and what you can do with what you build.
Yeah, now that you mention it, it's kind of weird that for a game that was so based on, manipulating physics, that it was built on this foundation of magic and just arbitrary god rules.
Yeah, and again, that's because they had to put Banjo in it somehow, and they couldn't make it work except with Deus Ex Machinas. And again, their physics aren't even good. They, with regard to their wheels, that makes me wonder if they've ever seen a cross-section of a car before with the way they handle wheels. Because that's not how wheels work. They don't go down on stalks. They come out horizontally on stalks. And that's why they absorb shocks. And they have shock absorbers. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts has no damn shock absorbers. So when your vehicle falls, as it inevitably will in a game that's trying to look like a platformer, often the wheel will just break.
Uh-huh.
It's just a piss-poor attempt at a vehicle game. Lego did it better 10 years ago.
And I think you've said it all right there. I mean, I feel like, I feel like, coming into Nuts and Bolts when I did, I just played it like last year for the first time. I was surprised because I was expecting it to be entirely without merit. And then there was that period where I was like, okay, this isn't completely terrible. And, I started thinking, okay, maybe this is actually a good game, but I guess it just doesn't really hold up no matter how you look at it, no matter where you're looking at it from.
I think the problem is that I was really hooked on Nuts and Bolts for a while, but I think the problem, though, is that the more you play it, the more you realize its deficiencies. For example, when you just have enough parts to make a little car that doesn't really tax gravity all that much, it works okay. But once you get to more demanding challenges and have to build a more complex vehicle, and flight comes in, then you start to realize that they didn't think it through enough. I mean, building a wide vehicle is just practically worthless. And also, where the hell is combat? I remember, I'm quoting directly from my post there. I mean, probably the best moment in that whole game was the final boss battle. It was cool to build a flying saucer, or no, not a flying saucer, sorry, flying rounded rectangle, which is all I could build with those damned ugly pieces, but, it was cool to build that sort of thing and take down Gruntilda. But why the hell wasn't there more of that in the game? That would have made me overlook its shortcomings. But it was instead just, Junkyard Wars, the sucky version of the game. And I would have loved I'd love a good Junkyard Wars game, but we don't have one. And it shouldn't star Banjo.
I just hope that companies seeing how badly Nuts and Bolts did and how badly Nuts and Bolts was received doesn't keep them from wanting to continue to explore this concept.
Yeah, and another big gripe for me is that Lego, which was just starting to explore that concept back when they did Lego Racers and Lego Racers 2, has totally abandoned that in favor of licensed games by Traveler's Tales that don't have any creative building involved.
Wait. There's no creative building in the newest Lego games?
So far as I know, no. They
what part of Lego did they not get?
Well, let's see, they have building, but it's just you go up to something, you press a button, and it builds automatically. And, I guess they think that now Lego is more recognizable for all the brands it's licensed than anything else. And it's rather telling that the first time Traveler's Tales did a Lego game that wasn't based on a license, which was Lego Universe, their MMO, it failed. Because I think what sells those games is the licenses. Taken on their own, they're not good Lego games. And in an nod to Nuts and Bolts again, I've played Traveler's Tales Lego games, and I don't think they're very good in any regard. I feel like they have a lot of the same flaws that Donkey Kong 64 has, along with being much more clunky and even harder to understand. For example, the other day I was in GameStop and I played the demo of Marvel's Superheroes. I don't know if you've played that demo, but you're not going to believe this. It started me at this level where I had Hulk and Iron Man in my playable character installed. If you've ever played these games, they work basically with the Donkey Kong 64 style of use this character to do this task. So here's what was going on. There was a truck blocking the road. I figured I'll try to fly over it with Iron Man, but there's an invisible wall over the truck. So I switched to Hulk and figured, okay, I'll use Hulk to get rid of the truck. So I go up to the truck with Hulk, and he can't do anything. He can't smash it, he can't lift it, he can't move it, or anything like that. And I had to play for for like 10 minutes before I realized that what I was supposed to do was play as Iron Man, go up to the truck, press a button so he could build handles on the truck, and then you'd switch to Hulk so the Hulk could grab the handles and lift the truck up. That is just ridiculous logic any way you skew it. I'm 28 years old. I couldn't figure that out. And the games are made for kids. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, even if you were to buy that Hulk can't get a good grip on the truck to lift it up without handles, it's not like he even has to lift it. He could just push it aside. And that's the sort of logic these games work. I mean, I can't believe this shit sells.
Jesus, that's ridiculous. I mean, the Hulk needed handles. You had to figure out that Iron Man was supposed to build handles for the Hulk.
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
Jeez. It reminds me of a classic article about the death of adventure games back in the 90s, and it was talking about this puzzle in some Sierra game. I think it was Gabriel Knight 3, where you have to make a fake ID of a person, and the person doesn't have a mustache, but you're supposed to both build a fake mustache for yourself and then scribble one on his ID card.
What an adventure.
Yeah, what an exciting adventure.
I can't even visualize that one.
I don't know whether, I guess people, I guess I get a little disappointed when games are a little too obvious about what you're supposed to do, especially if it's kind of a puzzle game kind of thing. But I mean, this bizarre dream logic, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think a game coming out anytime in these past years would fucking fall into that.
Well, as I've said many times, if people buy shit, there's no need to give them not shit.
And this is true. This is very true.
But I mean, I really have to wonder how many kids cried when they got that Marvel Superheroes game. And it got good reviews on IGN, too. and I'm assuming that's because it does have a lot of content, a lot of playable characters. That's what the Traveler's Tales Lego games are known for, is they give you a lot of playable characters to screw around with. And that's a valid defense, but that doesn't mean anything if you can't get to it. Like, if you're only 2 characters, you get to Starter, Iron Man, and the Hulk, and you can't get through this damned truck puzzle and unlock anyone else. I mean, again, it's like Donkey Kong 64, except worse. There's a lot of stuff hidden in there that could be enjoyable, but the amount of crap you have to get through to get to it just puts a damper on it. And I mean, I don't hate Donkey Kong 64. I've come to realize its flaws are real, but the world owes it a big apology if it's gonna give Traveler's Tales that license to do what they do.
Yeah, but, Traveler's Tales didn't betray Nintendo and go off with Microsoft, so...
Yeah, and again, once again, I don't remember seeing a single thing negative written about DK64 until the buyout happened.
No, I honestly don't either. I mean, people loved it. It was fucking game of the year. Everybody had it. Everybody had the fucking expansion pack.
I mean, back then the only thing I hated about DK64 was that damned arcade game with artificial difficulty. Because, I mean, I've played the original Donkey Kong arcade game. You get 3 fucking lives, Rare. Why the fuck did you take away all of my lives? And why the fuck did I have to play it twice? I mean, I have not beaten DK64 without a Game Shark. And that is the only place ever that I've used a Game Shark to beat a Nintendo 64 game.
Yeah,
and
too.
I bought the Game Shark just to do that.
I haven't ever beaten the DK arcade portion. It's... DK64, it's such a complicated issue. I do want to backtrack something you said earlier. I've played Conker's Bad Fur Day on the N64, but I haven't gotten around to playing Live and Reloaded. What about that was disappointing?
Well, I didn't own Live and Reloaded. I didn't own an original Xbox for that matter. So my only time playing Live and Reloaded was the demo. And so I'm not exactly the best person to ask about this, but I can tell you what I did see based on the demo. Is that by that time the idea of an M-rated animal platformer was no longer a selling point because they were spoofing something that didn't really exist anymore. So, for that reason, the marketing of the game was very much centered on the war portion. So they were trying to make it look like a spoof of multiplayer shooters instead of a spoof of collectathon platformers. And so, really the only part of it I've played was the demo that had the war portion. And I will say they did improve it. In some regards, it did look better. However, one thing that bothered me about that bit was they switched the teddies from being teddy bears to being actual bears in army suits. So, whereas in the Nintendo 64 version, when you shot them, they leaked stuffing, they actually bled in the Xbox version. So they'd basically gone against that bit of what Conker was in favor of making it into something they thought would be better for the current generation of gamers. And so that's all I was able to discover, but basically when I looked up other people's opinions, it seems like that trend runs throughout the whole game. For example, instead of the frying pan, they gave Conker a spiked bat as a weapon. they added enemies all over, despite the fact that it didn't, as Sean said, it wasn't that type of game, so that breaks it up quite a bit. They censored things. For some reason, they didn't get Conker's facial expressions down the way they did in the N64 original. Add to the big thing that was supposed to be the selling point, the multiplayer was apparently glitchy. I never played the multiplayer, so I can't comment on that, but it's water under the bridge now, since Xbox Live is, several years dead?
I believe you can still play the multiplayer sections over a local network.
That's interesting. Well, Sean said it was glitchy. And something I know there, too, is that they don't have Conker at all in the multiplayer section. And so I'm sure that was a big disappointment for a lot of people, because I remember one of the big fun things about the N64 Originals multiplayer is that with the use of codes, you could play as just about everybody. You could have the zombie walking around with a samurai sword or Uzis in the war portion. Even if it didn't make sense, you could do it. You could have a zombie shooting a caveman. Whereas with the Xbox port, they just had it reduced to a generic class-based shooter that was, so far as I know, completely humorless. So, I mean, I don't know as much about Live and Reloaded as some people, but I have a pretty good idea of what it did that made people not like it.
It's really unfortunate that game didn't deliver for us, because, it was pretty much, the only DKU series that was getting a sequel at the time, and there was all that excitement that, it was going to have this big multiplayer, and we were going to have these DKVine clans, and, we were going to really, it was going to be, DKVine taking it to the modern day, kind of being a more contemporary gaming experience, and it just didn't really pan out.
Yeah, it didn't, and I really do think Rare was choosing an uphill battle there. I mean, even if they had made a great multiplayer mode, I don't think they'd have ever been able to overshadow the likes of Halo or Battlefield or Gears of War. I know that's the bandwagon they were hoping to get on, but
yeah, the idea was,
I mean, back in the N64 days, Rare didn't get on the bandwagon. They basically were the bandwagon.
Yeah.
I mean, Nintendo started the collectathon platformer with Super Mario 64, but it was Rare who took that idea and made it their own. Whereas with the Mario series, it's basically abandoned that, as of to some extent.
Yeah, Sunshine was pretty much the last hurrah for that.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't necessarily miss it. These days, I'm pretty sure you've read, I have a consistently lower opinion of collectathon platformers. I feel that they, again, rely on too many Deus Ex Machinas for their worlds to work, and I prefer worlds that are contiguous. For example, instead of going from Spiral Mountain to Gruntilda's lair and then warping to Mumbo's Mountain via a magic portal, I wish there was just a way to walk from Spiral Mountain all the way to Mumbo's Mountain and the like. I prefer the Zelda-like organization of worlds.
Kind of like what Banjo-Tooie was experimenting with.
Yeah, I think Banjo-Tooie was ahead of its time, and that one of the big problems with Banjo-Tooie was that they still tried to be within the collectathon platformer mode, whereas it would have been likely a much better, a much more organized game had they gone and completely abandoned that and had just a game where you explore and talk to people, and where there weren't plot coupons in the traditional sense, but it would be more like Zelda. And I really think that, rather than Rareware, much as I like them, I really think that should have been the model for 3D games, is instead of collecting more of the same old plot coupons to get somewhere, like get the specific item, then you can latch on to this ledge and pull yourself up. I feel that's the more appealing way. But I mean, with regards to what came before it, I prefer the old style of platformer where you've got 2D overworlds and levels that go from point A to point B, because that just feels more like a journey to me, whereas with the collectathon platformers, it's more like a series of sorties, where you go into a place, do a mission, and then go home, and then come back and do another mission. I prefer to feel like I've actually traveled a long distance.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, this is one area. This is another area where I've started to turn against what the site used to celebrate, and I think a lot of. And I mean, I know, like, I sound like I'm becoming what I hate here, because thanks to Rare's recent screw-ups, I started to become more skeptical of what they were like in their heyday. However, I mean, Rare had questionable design choices in their heyday, but there's no doubt they had elbow grease. They gave it their all, and that's what's really more important than anything else. As Einstein said, success is 20% inspiration and 80% perspiration. So, yeah, I may be thinking these days that Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day were overrated. I do, but I still think they're very well-made games.
Yeah, and it's, it's real hard to push that position here on DKVine, because, not only are we such big fans of these things, and, naturally there's going to be a lot of disagreement, but that kind of sentiment is so echoed in, in the media and everything for, such bad reasons so often. People kind of get, defensive, it gets their hackles up when they hear that kind of talk.
Well, the big problem is that, like what you said with politics earlier, you think people agree with you, but they don't really get it the way they do. For example, EGM's description of Donkey Kong 64 in their list of the most overrated games ever, they were comparing it to going through the supermarket looking for bananas. And that's just dumb. I mean, that's not what it's like. For one thing, I never had any trouble finding bananas in a supermarket. But I mean, the problem with DK64 wasn't that you were looking for things. The problem was that they didn't need to be there at all in many cases. I think with DK64, to their credit, Rare really was trying to be kind of like an old-school 2D platformer where you'd do things in a specific order. First you'd go through the level, then you'd fight a boss, then you'd get to another level, that sort of thing. And that is something that Super Mario 64 didn't do, with the exception of those Bowser levels that you had to beat to get to other areas of the castle. So I do commend them for that end of making Donkey Kong 64 more like a classic platformer in that regard. At the same time, their means were bad. So instead of having levels where you just go from point A to point B, fight your way to the boss, then fight the boss, and then walk directly to another level, what they did was have this ridiculously contrived system where you go through the level collecting colored bananas. Then you go to a room, feed the bananas to a pig. If you don't have enough, you need to switch to another Kong and collect different colored bananas. And you keep going back and feeding the pig, and then he steps on a seesaw to put the hippo up. and then you get to open a boss door, which you can only fight with a specific Kong. Then you fight the boss, you get a key, you take the key to K. Lumsey, he dances around and causes an earthquake that opens up something. It's just a head-scratching... It's embarrassing, really, when you talk about it that way. It made sense when I was playing it, and it was never really a problem for me. I didn't have a problem understanding it, but there really were too many things that you had to collect that only worked because of contrived 1990s platformer logic. At the same time, I don't think DK64 is an unfun game at all. There's a lot of bits that I like. It's just that I like it better without the collecting.
I think my favorite part was having to get a potion for Donkey Kong so that he could pull levers. I mean...
yeah, I mean, it's sort of like the whole physics argument with nuts and bolts, and also with that damned Lego Marvel Superheroes game. I mean, if something works physically and you have that frame of mind built in, why not have a game work like that? So in other words, if Donkey Kong is strong enough to do something like punch out a Kremling, there's no reason why he's not strong enough to pull a lever. And if Chunky's stronger than Donkey Kong to the point that he can punch down gates, why can't he pull a lever? For me, Donkey Kong 64 really should have been all about physics. For example, instead of junk like, you can't, in order to enter this door, you need Diddy Kong because somehow he's the only one who can push this stamp down, despite the fact that a lot of characters are heavier than him. It should have been more like, you need Diddy Kong to get up to this area. And then you could have more in-between puzzles, like where there's a jump that's too high for some Kongs, but then there's a boulder that Diddy Kong's too weak to get rid of. So in other words, if you brought Chunky to the area, he wouldn't be able to make the jump. But if you got Diddy to the area, he wouldn't be able to move the boulder. So you'd have to use Donkey Kong, who had just high enough jumps and just enough strength to get the boulder. That's what DK64 should have been.
Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, you talk about how Donkey Kong needs a potion to pull a lever. I don't even see why you needed the potions. I don't see why it wouldn't have just been acceptable to go and have the moves the first time. I mean, you needed a potion, as far as I know, 3 times to get upgraded ground pound moves. That didn't make any sense.
Yeah. I don't know, it seems like they, I don't know.
I think what's going on is they were trying to put a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to phrase that. I couldn't grasp the cliche.
And I mean, to be fair, that problem plagued Super Mario 64 too. I think with Super Mario 64, on the one hand, it was a good game and it inspired basically every 3D platformer that came out afterwards. On the other hand, the fact that it did that basically proves that it had nothing to do with Mario. So, with Super Mario 64, they basically threw out everything that made Mario Mario and put in new mechanics, and it worked in as its own game, but at the same time, a lot of what Mario was just got forgotten, whereas the Super Mario 64 mold of game proved applicable to every game, regardless of whether it was Mario, provided they obeyed it well. With Donkey Kong 64, I think they weren't willing to throw everything that made Donkey Kong in the 2D era, and that was a bit of a problem because it created places that were so rough around the edges. And in fact, I see some of that now in Super Mario 3D World. And let's be clear, I love Super Mario 3D World. It is, in many regards, the Mario game I wish Super Mario 64 would be. At the same time, well, Super Mario 64 was created as a complete standalone mechanical game with not much to do with what Mario had been, and worked. Super Mario 3D World is constantly trying to incorporate stuff from the 2D games, and these do create the occasional problems. For example, you'll probably come across places in Super Mario 3D World where the camera is just locked. It won't let you look up, because if you look up, you won't get that old 2D feel of something being hidden up a wall or something like that. And also, you have fireballs, even though they don't really work too well when you can fly anywhere instead of just forward. And same with Koopa shells, they aren't really that scary when they can bounce any which way. So, in other words, it really is two different ways to approach game design. One, doing everything completely new, and the other, incorporating things from the past. And with Donkey Kong 64, I think they were just trying to do both at once, and it didn't work too well.
That's probably why. That's why Banjo was so much better.
Exactly. Banjo was always its own thing. What Banjo was always spiritual successor to Super Mario 64. So, and yeah, Banjo did it better. I personally like Donkey Kong 64 better than Banjo-Kazooie just because it's harder than Banjo-Kazooie. I think Banjo-Kazooie is overall a bit too easy. But Banjo-Tooie I still consider the best 3D platformer ever made. I understand it's not for everyone, but it did things I haven't seen any 3D platformer do since.
No, I definitely say Banjo-Kazooie at its hardest was harder than anything in DK64. But yeah, overall I'd agree.
Yeah. I also say Banjo-Kazooie is generally easier than Super Mario 64. Moreover, Super Mario 64 really is a platformer through and through, whereas Banjo-Kazooie has platforming, but some of its challenges due to going into places and playing mini-games. But yeah, overall it's not that hard of a game. But yeah, it was a much better realized game than Donkey Kong 64. I don't see any rough edges in Banjo-Kazooie. I see things that could have been elaborated on, but everything looks clean in Banjo-Kazooie, whereas Donkey Kong 64 really is a mess.
Very true. Very true. We've been recording for about an hour and a half now.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, is there anything else you'd want to talk about?
Well, I could give Highway his due and read my dream to him.
Oh, yes, I was looking quite forward to that.
Alright. Here goes.
Oh, if you would.
Let me bring it up. There are any number of these dreams that I could read and probably get a good laugh out of people, but he wants that one, so, let me see. Look on the page. Okay, what are some dreams you have?
I think the only thing better than Highway's dream posts are Highway's drug-addled posts.
I wasn't aware he was on drugs.
Oh yeah, he's always posting in the drunk or high thread.
Oh wow, I wasn't even aware we had a drunk or high thread.
Yeah, yeah, I think they took the high portion out of it. I'm not sure why. But, hasn't stopped people from posting about it.
Maybe they're afraid of Tom Wheeler. This thread went on a long, long time.
It's a long runner.
Okay, here we go. Alright, here's for you, Highway. Here's a really crazy one I had last night. It started with me being back with my family getting hungry, so we decided to go to a place called Super Mario Burger. Yes, that was its name, and in the dream we recognized it as a violation of trademark. We must have been on a road trip because Super Mario Burger was part of a little rest stop in the middle of the desert. Anyway, we got our burgers, and then I got out to flip through Mad Magazine, because there was also a magazine rack near the gas station and burger joint. Then my family drove off, leaving me to run after them. I must have gone the wrong way, though, because I wound up in this military compound. I got to what was effectively a dead end, being at the edge of a cliff, but then a train came by, one that hung from its tracks rather than rode on them, probably inspired by the ones in Kaya Dark lineage. So I figured I could get on that and ride to where I could tell someone about my predicament and maybe call my parents. Instead, though, they kicked me off at the next stop, a place called Camp Mudslide. This was some military boot camp, and since I was on the train, they figured I must be one of the recruits. I should mention now that all the buildings at Camp Mudslide were made of fairly natural-looking wood. Some were just bundles of sticks bolted together with thatched roofs. So the sergeant put us in formation and had us march round for a while. That night I settled into my assigned bunkhouse, which was made out of a hollowed redwood log. It was surprisingly well furnished on the inside, having tile floors and 3 bathtubs and toilets, which was more than I thought the place needed. Anyway, I went to bed, and when I woke up, I found that it was raining pretty hard outside. One of my bunkmates remarked, "If this keeps up, Camp Mudlight's gonna turn into a real mudslide." Sure enough, the rain poured down so hard that the bunkhouse log washed away while we were in it, and then we got dragged into a river and floated down it for a while. Officially free of Camp Mudslide, we weren't quite sure where we were heading, but then Batman called us up, and I'm not kidding, it really was Batman, because I saw a cutscene of him at his computer talking to us. He wanted us to go on a secret mission in this city we floated to, so somehow the log bump house got out of the river and onto the freeway. Here, of course, we needed to steer it, which we unrealistically accomplished by one guy standing at the window on one end of the bunkhouse and moving to one side of it, while the rest of us got at the other end and moved to the opposite end. Then I woke up.
Wow. I mean, when you get it read out like that, it really takes on a whole new energy, you know?
Yeah, I think probably a big part of the appeal might be my weird voice, because maybe having that sort of thing read it makes it all the weirder. And you know what's really funny is I have seen plenty of actual businesses that illegally use Mario. I saw one in the Penny Saver just a few weeks ago that I actually posted on my Facebook with a wisecrack next to it. So I've seen several businesses called Super Mario Brothers Plumbing. And one actually had a picture of Mario on it. But the funny thing is, one of these Mario plumbing trucks, instead of just using a regular picture, they used a picture of Mario from Super Mario Sunshine, but they basically airbrushed out Flood and photoshopped a wrench into his hand and a plunger into the other. And I wonder why they even bothered to do something that complicated.
They picked the one Mario game where he has a fucking backpack on all the time. Oh my god.
And I mean, you see things all the time that fly under the radar and get away with copyright infringement. For example, back where my family used to go a lot, there was this place called Moriscos del Guero that had Alfred E. Newman as the mascot for whatever reason. And eventually they ended up taking that down, presumably because they got a cease and desist. But there was a place called Mr. Taco also that used Speedy Gonzales as their mascot, and as far as I know, that one never got taken down.
Down the street from me, there's a super car wash that has a big fucking picture of Superman on the side. And I don't know how they've gotten away with that for so many years, but it's still there.
I don't know why they had Superman as a car wash mascot.
I don't either.
I mean, like, the one power Superman doesn't have is water powers.
He doesn't even own a car.
I mean, what does he do for a car wash? Pee on it?
Oh, this is super strange.
I mean, at least I get why you'd make Mario a plumbing mascot.
Yeah, that's... I don't get why you'd go with Super Mario Sunshine's Mario.
Yeah, I don't either.
Man. Oh, man. That's crazy.
So, I can't help thinking there might have been other stuff I wanted to mention. Oh, yeah, I'm an editor.
You're an editor?
Yeah, if anybody has stuff they want me to write, I'm really, really cheap and I should say affordable because that doesn't carry negative connotations. So yeah, I'm an editor. I charge substantially less. And yeah, I'm plugging my business here, so sue me. No, don't sue me. Yeah. If anyone wants, go to Thomas Circle Editing, all one word, .altervista.org/index.html, and I'll edit papers for anyone who wants to edit. The funny thing is, when I was reading that Super Mario Burger Dream, it has a lot of typos. I promise I'll do better if you pay me to edit. And it's not expensive. Like, I've seen editing businesses online. I actually looked up what the going rate for an editor was, and ridiculously enough, a lot of them charge by the hour. That seems like the way to me that you shouldn't charge for an editing session, because that just gives an editor a license to slack off and take longer. Well, I don't charge by the hour. I charge by the word. So, in other words, the motivation is to get it done faster so I can take on other jobs. So yeah, if anybody needs something edited and wants to publish something, I'm currently editing for a book. I can't say more than that because revealing the book before it's published would count as piracy, but I'm editing for a book, and if anyone wants anything edited, I'll do it. So just, again, the website is thomascircleediting.altervista.org/index.html.
Oh, interesting. Well, thank you for doing the show, Mr. Bahmo Spartacus.
All right,
pleasure having
Fairfield.
You on.
Anyway, so
Mr. Thomas Fairfield.
All right, so how do I stop this recording and save it?
Yeah.
This has been produced by
Seth
and
Bahmo, a.k.a. Seth, a.k.a. DK Spartacus, a.k.a. Thomas, a.k.a. Quackapuhihi, a.k.a. Satan.